What happens when one of Hollywood's most beloved actresses faces off against a seasoned news anchor who refuses to back down from the most uncomfortable questions? The tension in the Good Morning America studio was so thick you could cut it with a knife. And what started as a routine promotional interview quickly spiraled into television chaos that left everyone watching in complete shock. Jennifer Lawrence, known for her quick wit and non-nonsense attitude, was about to meet her match in George Stephanopoulos, but not in the way anyone expected. Before we dive into this incredible confrontation, make sure to hit that subscribe button and drop a comment below telling us about the most awkward interview you've ever witnessed. Because trust me, you're about to see something that will top them all. The morning started like any other at the Good Morning America studio. Jennifer Lawrence had arrived early, looking polished and professional in a navy blue blazer, her blonde hair perfectly styled for the cameras. She was there to promote her latest film, a dramatic thriller that had been generating significant Oscar buzz. The pre-interview chat with the producers had gone smoothly, everyone laughing at her trademark self-deprecating humor about tripping on red carpets and accidentally photobombing other celebrities. But something felt different the moment George Stephanopoulos walked onto the set. "Jennifer, always a pleasure," George said, extending his hand with what seemed like a genuine smile, though there was an intensity in his eyes that hadn't been there during previous interviews. "Hey, George, thanks for having me back," Jennifer replied, settling into the plush interview chair and adjusting her blazer. "I have to say, your team makes the best coffee in morning television." "We aim to please," George responded, taking his seat across from her. "Though I suspect after our conversation today, you might need something stronger than coffee." Jennifer raised an eyebrow, her smile faltering slightly. "That sounds ominous. Are we talking about my movie, or are you planning an intervention?" "Oh, we'll definitely discuss your film," George said, shuffling through his notes with deliberate slowness. "But I think our viewers deserve to hear about some other recent developments in your career, don't you think?" The studio lights seemed to grow brighter as the cameras began rolling. George straightened his tie and looked directly into the main camera with his practiced professional demeanor. "Good morning. I'm George Stephanopoulos, and joining us today is Academy Award winner Jennifer Lawrence, here to discuss her powerful new thriller, Fractured Mirror." "Jennifer, welcome back to Good Morning America." "Thanks for having me, George. It's great to be here," Jennifer said, though her voice carried a hint of caution that hadn't been there moments before. "Now, this film deals with some pretty heavy themes. Corruption in the justice system, cover-ups at the highest levels of government. Was this project particularly meaningful to you given your own recent experiences with, shall we say, institutional challenges?" Jennifer's smile became more forced. "I think the film speaks for itself, George. It's a story about fighting for truth when powerful people try to silence you. I was drawn to the character because she refuses to back down when she knows she's right." Speaking of not backing down, George leaned forward slightly, his voice taking on that familiar prosecutorial tone that had made him famous in political interviews. "There have been some interesting developments regarding your production company's tax situation. Care to comment on the audit that's been making headlines?" The question hit like a sledgehammer. Jennifer's posture stiffened, and for a moment, the bubbly persona that America had fallen in love with completely disappeared. "I'm sorry, what does that have to do with my film?" she asked, her voice dropping to a dangerously low register. "Well, some might say there's a certain irony in promoting a movie about corruption while dealing with questions about financial transparency in your own business dealings," George pressed, clearly enjoying the discomfort he was causing. "George, I came here to talk about my work as an actress, not to be ambushed with tabloid gossip disguised as journalism." Jennifer shot back, her cheeks flushing with anger. "I hardly think questions about public records constitute tabloid gossip, Jennifer. Your production company received significant tax incentives from 3 different states last year. Don't you think taxpayers deserve to know how those funds were used?" "You know what I think?" Jennifer's voice was rising now, and she leaned forward in her chair, matching George's aggressive posture. "I think you're confusing Good Morning America with some kind of congressional hearing. I'm an actress, not a politician running for office. But you've certainly been vocal about political issues," George countered smoothly. "You've criticized tax policies, corporate welfare, government waste. Doesn't that make your own business practices fair game for discussion?" "My business practices?" Jennifer laughed, but there was no humor in it. "George, are you seriously suggesting that my production company, which employs dozens of people and creates jobs in multiple states, is somehow comparable to corporate welfare?" I'm simply asking questions that our viewers might have. After all, you've built a brand around being relatable, down to earth, one of the people. But these financial arrangements suggest a level of wealth management that might surprise your fans. Jennifer's hands were clenched so tightly in her lap that her knuckles were turning white. You want to talk about surprising fans? How about surprising them with actual journalism instead of this gotcha nonsense? I've been audited, George. You know what they found? Nothing. Because unlike some people in this business, I actually follow the rules. I'm sure you do, George said with a patronizing smile that made Jennifer's jaw clench. But the optics are interesting, don't you think? A self-proclaimed champion of the working class, using the same tax strategies as the 1% she so often criticizes. The same tax strategies? Jennifer's voice was incredulous. George, I pay more in taxes than most people make in a lifetime. I employ accountants and lawyers, because that's what responsible business owners do. But somehow you're making that sound sinister. I'm not making it sound like anything, Jennifer. I'm simply presenting facts and letting viewers draw their own conclusions. Facts? Jennifer stood up abruptly, her chair rolling backward. You want facts? Here's a fact for you. I donate more money to charity in a single year than most corporations pay in taxes. I create jobs. I support causes I believe in. And I pay every penny I owe to the government. But apparently that's not good enough for your narrative. George remained seated, calm as ever, which only seemed to infuriate Jennifer more. Please sit down. We're having a conversation. No, George, we're not having a conversation. You're conducting an ambush disguised as an interview, and I'm not going to sit here and pretend this is normal. Jennifer, I understand you're upset, but these are legitimate questions that deserve answers. Legitimate questions? Jennifer's laugh was sharp and bitter. You know what would be legitimate? Asking me about the 18-hour days I worked on this film. Asking me about the research I did to portray a character dealing with institutional betrayal. Asking me about the incredible cast and crew who poured their hearts into this project. But instead, you're more interested in playing prosecutor over my tax returns. George's expression hardened. I'm interested in the truth, Jennifer. And the truth is that celebrities often preach one thing while practicing another. Isn't that worth exploring? The truth. Jennifer stepped closer to George's chair, her voice dropping to an icy whisper that somehow carried more menace than her earlier shouting. The truth is that you've decided to make me the villain in whatever story you're trying to tell. Facts be damned. Well, congratulations, George. You've successfully turned what should have been a celebration of art into a character assassination. The tension in the studio was palpable as Jennifer Lawrence stood over George Stephanopoulos, her chest rising and falling with barely controlled anger. The crew members behind the cameras exchanged worried glances, clearly unsure whether they should continue rolling or cut to commercial. But George seemed energized by the confrontation, his eyes gleaming with the kind of predatory satisfaction that comes from drawing blood. Character assassination is a strong accusation, Jennifer, George said, his voice maddeningly calm as he looked up at her. I prefer to think of it as accountability journalism, something that's been lacking in entertainment media for far too long. Accountability journalism? Jennifer's voice cracked with disbelief. George, you're not holding me accountable for anything real. You're manufacturing controversy because actual news doesn't get the same ratings as manufactured drama. I think our viewers are smart enough to distinguish between manufactured drama and legitimate concerns about celebrity hypocrisy, George replied, gesturing toward the cameras. Why don't you sit back down and help them understand the distinction? Because I don't owe you or anyone else an explanation for running a legal business, Jennifer snapped, but she reluctantly returned to her chair, perching on the edge as if ready to bolt at any moment. And frankly, I'm insulted that you think your viewers are so easily manipulated by your loaded questions. Loaded questions? George's eyebrows rose in mock surprise. Jennifer, I'm simply asking about publicly available information. If the questions feel loaded, perhaps that says more about the answers than it does about my journalism. Your journalism? Jennifer let out a harsh laugh. Is that what we're calling this? Because from where I'm sitting, it feels more like a witch hunt dressed up in a morning show format. George leaned back in his chair, clearly enjoying her discomfort. You know, I've interviewed presidents, prime ministers, world leaders facing genuine scandals. None of them have reacted quite as defensively as you're reacting to questions about basic financial transparency. Maybe because they were actually guilty of something, Jennifer fired back. Or maybe because they were prepared for your ambush tactics. I came here expecting to talk about my art, not to defend myself against accusations you're making up as you go along. I'm not making anything up, Jennifer. Every fact I've presented is documented. Your production company did receive those tax incentives. You did use those specific financial structures. These aren't accusations. They're verifiable facts. Facts without context are just propaganda, George, Jennifer said, her voice steady but seething with anger. Yes, my company received tax incentives, the same ones offered to every production that meets the requirements. Yes, I have financial advisors who help me manage my money legally and responsibly. But you're presenting those facts like they're evidence of some kind of wrongdoing. I'm presenting them and letting viewers decide what they think, George countered. Isn't that what journalism is supposed to do? No, George. That's not what journalism is supposed to do. Jennifer leaned forward, her eyes blazing. Journalism is supposed to inform, not manipulate. It's supposed to seek truth, not create controversy. What you're doing is taking legal, ethical business practices and framing them like crimes. George's smile became even more condescending. I find it interesting that you keep using words like manipulation and framing, almost as if you're more concerned with public perception than with the underlying issues. Of course, I'm concerned with public perception, Jennifer exploded. I'm a public figure whose career depends on the trust and support of audiences. When you deliberately distort the facts to make me look bad, you're not just attacking me, you're attacking my livelihood. But if you're not doing anything wrong, why does the truth threaten your livelihood? George pressed, his voice taking on that prosecutorial edge that had made him famous in political circles. Because it's not the truth, George. It's your twisted interpretation of selective facts designed to create a narrative that doesn't exist. Jennifer's hands were shaking now. Whether from anger or adrenaline was impossible to tell. You're like a prosecutor who presents evidence of someone buying rope and shovels and lets the jury assume they're planning a murder, when really they're just gardening. That's a colorful analogy, George said with a smirk. But I think you're giving me too much credit for creativity. The narrative, as you call it, emerges from the facts themselves. The narrative emerges from your bias, Jennifer shot back. You decided before I walked in here that you wanted to take me down a peg, and you're using whatever ammunition you can find to do it. Take you down a peg? George's voice carried mock hurt. Jennifer, I have nothing but respect for your talent and your success. I'm simply trying to understand how someone who's been so vocal about inequality and fairness squares that with business practices that seem designed to minimize her own contributions to the system she claims to support. Minimize my contributions? Jennifer's voice rose to a near shout. George, I've paid more in taxes in the last 5 years than you'll make in your entire lifetime. I've donated millions to causes I believe in. I've used my platform to advocate for policies that would actually cost me money, because I think they're right for the country. But none of that matters to you, because it doesn't fit your gotcha moment. I'm not questioning your charitable giving or your advocacy, George said smoothly. I'm questioning the disconnect between your public positions and your private financial strategies. There is no disconnect, Jennifer said through gritted teeth. I follow the law. I pay my taxes. I give back to my community. The fact that I also make smart financial decisions doesn't make me a hypocrite. It makes me responsible. But doesn't it also make you part of the system you criticize? George pressed. When you use the same tax strategies as the corporations and wealthy individuals you've spoken out against, doesn't that undermine your credibility as a voice for change? Jennifer stared at him for a long moment, her jaw working as if she were physically restraining herself from saying something she might regret. George, let me ask you something. Do you think I should pay more taxes than I legally owe? Do you think I should deliberately make poor financial decisions to prove some kind of point? I think you should be consistent, George replied. If you believe the wealthy should pay more in taxes, perhaps you should lead by example instead of using every available loophole to minimize your own burden. Loophole? Jennifer's voice was dangerously quiet now. George, following the tax code isn't using loopholes, it's following the law. If you have a problem with the tax code, take it up with Congress. Don't sit here and attack me for being financially responsible while advocating for systemic change. I'm not attacking you, Jennifer. I'm asking questions that I think are fair and that our viewers deserve to have answered. Your viewers deserve better than this, Jennifer said, standing up again, this time with more controlled fury. They deserve actual journalism, not this tabloid ambush masquerading as news. They deserve to hear about the film I spent months of my life creating, not your conspiracy theories about my accountant. George remained seated, his calm demeanor now clearly calculated to contrast with Jennifer's visible anger. I understand you're frustrated, but running away from difficult questions isn't going to make them disappear. Running away? Jennifer's eyes flashed with something dangerous. George, I'm not running away from anything. I'm refusing to participate in your character assassination. There's a difference. There's a difference. What do you think about this explosive confrontation? Was George Stephanopoulos out of line? Or was Jennifer Lawrence's reaction justified? Share your thoughts in the comments below. If you want more unfiltered celebrity interviews and deep dives into Hollywood drama, make sure to subscribe and hit the notification bell. Don't miss our next video.